morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a little bit of a look at a deck that did very well in that giant tournament we just had over in Japan. Now, it happened in Tokyo just over a week ago, and when I say giant tournament, I mean 1,600 people. That's a big tournament, ladies and gentlemen. And in that tournament of 1,600 people, we had a win, well, a top 8 at least, which I think is a win in 1,600 people, for a deck that was all built around Keldeo GX, the Creation Trio GX, and the Victini from Unified Minds. And yes, it's a Japanese deck, so there are a couple of cards which aren't legal over here, but very, very few. So we start off with a Pokemon. There are literally only 3 different Pokemon that we actually play in this deck. And starting off, we've got the one with which we are most familiar. We've got Keldeo. Now, Keldeo GX has that rather redonkulous ability whereby it cannot take damage or any effects from attacks from EX or GX Pokemon. It's one of them there safeguard Pokemon. It's really quite good, though we call it Pure Heart. Now, you do have to worry about Power Plant. We'll get to Power Plant in a minute. We got a great card, which makes Keldeo way better and really doesn't make us worry about Power Plant. Cool. So anyway, Keldeo then just sits there being completely immune to EXs and GXs. And the format at the moment really is very heavy on EXs and GXs. Now, as for the attacks are fine. 2 water, 1 colorless, 110, not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. Really nice, incidentally, because if your opponent is trying to block you with something like a Alola Ninetales, you're like, oh, how adorable. Yeah, I can still attack you. And you do just enough to get a one-hit KO. And then for the same cost, the GX attack does 50 for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. It's fine, but it's nothing to get overly excited about. Should get you a KO at some point during the game. And then we've got Arceus and Dialga and Palkia. This is your main attacker here, when you're not blocking EXs and GXs. 1 water, 1 lightning, 1 colorless energy, 150 damage. Search your deck for 3 basic energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. Now, this is brilliant. You still need to get the first one going. You still need to get the energy onto the first one of these. But as soon as you get the energy onto the first one, you're fine. As soon as you got the energy on one, the first one will get the energy onto the others, and then you round and round you go, essentially. It's wonderful. But you do need to get the energy on the first one. It's a little bit of a pain, but what can you do? It's brilliant. 150 doesn't do a huge amount, but remember, you're not going to be throwing this against GXs. Because Keldeo is going to sit there blocking GXs. This is going to be the Pokemon you use to take out non-GXs, and against non-GXs, 150 is pretty gosh darn good. But we've also got a GX attack here that is beyond phenomenal. 1 Metal Energy, your Pokemon's attacks do 30 more for the rest of the game. But if you have a Water Energy on as well, your attacks still do 30 more for the rest of the game, but you also take an extra prize. And when I say your attacks, I mean all of your Pokemon, not just Arceus and Dialga and Palkia. So for the rest of the game, you're doing 30 more damage and taking an extra prize with every KO. Yeah, now you can see why this gets pretty gosh darn good. Now, generally speaking, this Creation Trio is seeing quite a lot of play in Japan, and I've shown you a couple decks, but I don't want to show you too many decks, because there are too many of them that just rely on Double Dragon Energy, so that you can't play them outside of Expanded. But what I adore about this deck doesn't even play Double Dragon Energy. Doesn't need Double Dragon Energy, because you've got the Victini from Unified Minds. And the Victini from Unified Minds for a single Fire Energy lets you search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards with different types and attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. Well, Arceus and Dialga Palkia is a water, a metal, and a colourless. And Keldeo is 2 water and a colourless. So Keldeo, you can just grab a water and something else, next turn attach a water and off you go. Arceus and Dialga, you grab a water and a metal, and next turn you attach anything else, and off you go. Now, incidentally, we don't play any other basic energy here, it's just metal and water, but either of your main attackers here can happily take a water and a metal and then attach a third energy next turn. It's brilliant and wonderful, and I love it. Now, the downside of Victini here is it is for a fire energy, so you got to play rainbow energy. It's fine. Honestly, it's a small price to pay. You whack a rainbow energy on Victini, and then you get one of your other attackers up and rolling pretty much guaranteed next turn, as long as you've got an energy in hand of any description. So I am completely and utterly on board with it. Now, in terms of trainers, one of the most important things we play here is Chaos Vortex. Chaos Vortex is a new stadium card. And essentially, you put it down, and if your opponent plays a stadium to replace it, that stadium gets discarded with no extra effect. Which means if your opponent tries to play a power plant, they can't. Chaos Vortex is down, your opponent goes to play a power plant, oh no! Chaos Vortex discards it immediately, and Keldeo keeps its ability. Chaos Vortex is going to single-handedly make Keldeo way better. At the moment, you can just play Power Plant in your deck, find a Power Plant, and just KO Keldeo. That's not an option with Chaos Vortex. Chaos Vortex makes a gigantic difference, and it really is going to make a gigantic difference. It's one of the reasons this is so gosh darn good, and honestly, it's one of the biggest lessons I think you should take from this video. Chaos Vortex makes Keldeo like 20 times as good. Now, in terms of supporters, you got the usual like Cynthia and Lily, and yes, obviously Guzma, because it's still legal in this tournament in Japan. Look, every deck plays it. It's not worth worrying about. You can replace it. But like so many of these decks, it plays some of these new tag team supporters. And incidentally, right, these new tag team supporters are popping up in like every good deck in Japan. First of all, Guzma and Hala. Guzma and Hala is phenomenal. It lets you search out a stadium card, and I've already said how important Chaos Vortex is, although admittedly only in some matchups. But if you then discard 2 cards from your hand, you can search for a Pokemon tool and a special energy. Now, the tools are quite good, we'll get there in a minute, but way more importantly here, it lets you search for that rainbow energy, which is super important turn 1 for Victini, but also just acts as energy search generally. And then we've got Cynthia and Caitlin that put a supporter card from your discard pile into your hand, and then you can discard a card from your hand and draw 3 cards. Again, really good card just for getting rolling, getting set up, getting what you need. And interestingly enough here, we also see 4 copies of Tag Call, so that you can get the tag team supporter card you want when you want it. And here that can be Guzma and Hala or Cynthia and Caitlin, or it can be Arceus and Dialga and Palkia. Either will be fine, that is wonderful. Now, the only, as far as I'm concerned, big loss in this deck is Nest Ball. You can play Cherish Ball to get your GXs, but losing Nest Ball to search out that Victini can actually be a bit of a pain. That is the one big loss that we're not going to have that Japan does. Then there's 3 copies of Switch to make sure you got the right Pokemon in the active. And we've got 2 copies of Reset Stamp because every deck plays Reset Stamp. It's a great comeback card. It's wonderful if your opponent takes a big lead. It makes your opponent shuffle a hand into their deck, draw a number of cards equal to their remaining prizes. Great if your opponent jumps out ahead. Every deck plays it. We've got Field Blower, which has rotated out, but then again, we've all replaced Field Blower. It's not a huge deal. We play Great Catcher as our gusting of choice. Discard 2 cards from our hand. Swap one of your opponent's EX or GX Pokemon on their bench with their active. We've got Enhanced Hammer, which has also rotated out, but again, it's one copy, it's no big loss. Choice Band is the other card which has really rotated out, which we might worry about, but again, every deck's lost it, it's not that big a deal. And one copy of Wishful Baton, which again, unfortunately, has rotated out. It's nice for conserving energy, but it's one copy, and we really don't worry about it too much. Like I've said, the only card that's rotated out that I'm even a little bit worried about is Nest Ball. I do think that makes the deck a little bit less consistent. But there's two things that this deck really shows. Firstly, Victini is great at getting some of these more awkward Pokemon out. And secondly, Keldeo is a force to be reckoned with Chaos Vortex coming out. Make no mistake about it, yes, I know this is a Japanese list and there's a couple of cards that we've lost. This deck will work when Cosmic Eclipse comes out, and this should be an extremely strong deck. So I encourage you very much to give it a go. But I would like to know what you think about it, ladies and gentlemen, so let me know in the comment section. Go nuts! Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about a whole bunch of games that don't even have any Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.